Hey everyone, welcome back to Masonzero MTG. 2024 is nearly over and there have been plenty of Magic sets. Some would argue too many. So I'm going to go through each set that came out in 2024 and let you know which cards have made their way into my cube and stayed there. You'll find a link to my cube in the description below, so feel free to follow along with me. For context, it's what I would consider a pretty average-ish cube that shares plenty of cards with the MTGO Vintage Cube kind of at its core, but at a probably far lower power level overall, with an emphasis on fun plays and a tendency towards more modern card designs. So the first set of 2024 was Murders at Carav Manor, which didn't bring too much to my cube, but what it did bring was reasonably impactful. The card I was most excited about was Delny Streetwise Lookout, which replaced Brightling. Delny obviously does a lot more, offering some great power boosts and synergies to small creatures, which I have plenty of. I like that it does help aggro specifically, but that it works with a variety of small creatures that have abilities that trigger when they enter. The only other card I added was Cryptic Coat, which is a really cool design, I think. I added it in place of Magus of the Unseen, which is a card I wanted to try for a while but didn't love, and that itself had recently replaced Memory Lapse, which I had taken out because I felt I had more counterspells than I wanted. Next we have Fallout, which was a commander-only set but had a few notable cards that have already become cube staples, and you probably already know I'm talking about Pre-War Formal Wear, which is an incredible reanimation equipment. This replaced Savior of Olenbach for me, which never ended up being as exciting as I wanted it to be, and it is essentially a pretty similar effect, but with way more hoops to jump through. I also included Securitron Squadron, which I really liked due to its ability to go super wide and buff up tokens. This replaced Mana Tithe for me because, again, I felt I had too many counterspells and people in white just weren't playing that one. Next we have Outlaws of Thunder Junction. This set had a few cards that caught my attention, but nothing too crazy. Dust Animus replaced Wingmate Rock so that I could have a cheaper, larger flyer. However, I did end up removing Dust Animus later, which you'll see later in this video. I added Requisition Raid in place of Crush Contraband, as it was a little more interesting and a little more efficient, and I found the exile aspect of Crush Contraband to not be super important in my cube. Lastly was Geralf the Fleshwright, which is a somewhat reliable token producer in blue, something I was lacking. The second paragraph may not happen super often. It's far from impossible to cast 3 spells in a turn, but I don't have a ton of other zombie creatures. This card replaced Zephyr Singer, which I love the design of, but I just don't think it fits in my cube with the way blue is designed. Geralf is a card I'm going to keep my eye on though, and if I find a better token maker in blue, or just something I like more or is more reliable maybe, or more synergistic, I will consider taking it out in favor of that card. Now we're at Modern Horizons 3, the most powerful set of the year for sure, and there were plenty of great cards to try out here. I absolutely love Emperor of Bones as a weird reanimation engine and graveyard hate. That replaced Kalitas, Trader of Get, which isn't all that dissimilar in terms of what it's trying to do, but has definitely been outclassed by now. Poor Kalitas. Kappa Cannoneer isn't new, but I picked up a printing in this set for the first time and replaced Gale Waterdeep Prodigy, who really didn't perform. I've been adding a lot more blue artifact synergies, so the Cannoneer is a perfect slot in. I had Walk the Aeons as my extra turn spell, just because it's, the one I had around for some reason. I ended up not really liking it, so I took it out, and I was happy to take it out, especially because the blue card that I added in was Tamiyo Inquisitive Student, who I think is a really great sort of grindy value card and an excellent early game blocker against an aggro deck. The blue 1-drop creature slot definitely needed something like this, and I think it's pretty cool. I added Flare of Duplication as a potentially free way to copy a spell, which took the place of Chain Lightning since I already had plenty of burn spells, and this one was the least exciting to me. Strict Serenade came in as a super cheap counterspell, and I know I've been saying I wanted to remove some counterspells, but I liked the efficiency of this one as well as the fact that it gives your opponent something. It really adds a lot of extra choices. I also think that it hits some of the most important targets in my cube that you would want to be countering. This replaced Treasure Cruise, which I don't think was performing as well as it used to, especially since I don't have enough dedicated self-mill to really make it reliably cost 1 mana. Reckless Pyrosurfer was a new aggressive creature that can buff up your team, which is definitely something that I was looking for in red. And I replaced Riftbolt with this, again in an effort to reduce the number of kind of boring burn spells. Another reprint, I finally got my hands on Lelia, the Blade Reforged, who replaced Urabrask. Lelia is just insane, you know that if you've ever played with her, and I have some other Exile synergies that work well with her, so I really wanted to make sure she got in the cube. Urabrask is good, but I think is better suited for a cube with Storm in it. There just wasn't a good reason to pick him in my list. I also finally got a copy of Ophiomancer, who is a great token maker for sacrifice decks, and just in general is good value. And this replaced Hidetsugu Devouring Chaos, which really didn't do anything. Not sure exactly why I had it in the cube, but it was there. I also added 6, which I really enjoy as a way to get value out of the graveyard, one of my favorite things to do, and this replaced Oracle of Moldiah, which I felt was a little too slow in my cube. Speaking of slow 4-drops, I took out Vizier of the Menagerie in favor of Fanatic of Ronus, and that combination of ramp and a late game body makes it way more interesting to me. The next set was the controversial, but also kind of flash in the pan set Assassin's Creed. This set was relatively low powered, but had a few cards worth playing, and as a big fan of most of the Assassin's Creed games, I was definitely excited to play with some of these cards. So first we have Basim ibn Ishaq. He loves historic spells, which I have plenty of in this cube, and he can turn into a game ender all on his own. Again, trying to add more blue artifact synergies, so this worked out really well. He replaced Truss Chief Engineer because as powerful as I think Truss can be, they seem to be too much of a meme or too confusing, so no one ever really drafted them. Tax Collector is up next, an excellent and versatile control card that gets better with blink effects. I don't have too many blink effects, but I think there's enough that you might be able to have this trigger a couple times. It replaced Student of Warfare, who I think has been solidly outclassed at this point. Delver of Secrets has also been kind of on the cusp of feeling outclassed, so I took the opportunity to just remove it now, and in its place I added Become Anonymous, which works as both a protection spell at instant speed, a way to get a lot of surprise blockers for an unexpected block, or even to set up an attack on your next turn. I might be the only one, but I really like Assassin Initiate as a way to give black-based aggro decks a flexible tool, and I took out another 1-drop, Viscera Seer, since I don't have too much sacrifice in my cube, and would rather support aggressive cards in that 1-mana slot. Finally, Senu Keen-Eyed Protector replaced Adorned Pouncer, which has not been the most exciting card for aggro decks. Senu seems crazy and I hope will stay relevant in my cube for a long time. With its evasion and recursion, I can see this dealing more damage than an Eternalized Adorned Pouncer over the course of a game. And after that was Bloomburrow. The first pick I was excited about was Kitza Otterball Elite. I took out Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel for it, which is not necessarily a 1-to-1 change, but when it comes to blue, I really want to make sure I'm not adding too many creatures. So if I'm adding a creature, I have to take one out. That's kind of my rule. Now Kitza does a lot. They like spells, they loot, they can copy spells. It's awesome. Next was Season of Weaving, replacing Mystic Confluence. Now don't get me wrong, Mystic Confluence is great, but Season of Weaving has some similarities while also offering some fun additions like copying a creature, and I highly value fun interactive things like that. Next up was Keen-Eyed Curator in place of Scavenging Ooze. I know not everyone is on board with this change, but I personally prefer the Curator, at least in my cube. It was really hard to cut the Skoos, of course, for sentimental reasons, but I think that the Curator is a little better in some contexts. Next, I wanted to add Essence Channeler, and it took the place of Dust Animus, which I had added earlier in the video. This upgraded Ajani's Pridemate may not see a ton of life gain triggers in my cube, but losing life shouldn't be terribly difficult. I wouldn't mind adding more life gain to my cube to support this card though. Finally, I knew I wanted to add Stormchaser's talent, but I didn't really have anything in mind to replace. I settled on cutting Phantasmal Image as I never really saw it do too much these days, and I did add in some other creature copying with Season of Weaving. Stormchaser's talent is cool since it makes prowess tokens and returns spells to your hand, all things that I enjoy doing. The next set is Dusk Morn. There are a lot of cool cards in this set, but I settled on just 3. The first is Kona Rescue Beastie. I like to have a green cheat big things in card in my cube, and Monster Manual was the most recent one that I was using. Kona is a bit more clean and easy to understand, plus it lets you put any permanent into play, not just a creature. I'd be interested in seeing if I can add some ways to tap them without attacking that can also synergize with the rest of the cube. Chainsaw was a card I got excited about since it's a removal spell and an equipment that gets better as the game goes on. As much as I didn't want to cut it, a Braid was the obvious choice to remove, as it also deals 3 damage only to a creature. I'm a little concerned about cutting artifact removal while also saying that I was adding artifact synergies, so I may reevaluate how much of that I have and find ways to add more in other slots. Lastly was Flood Pit's Drowner, another card that I wanted to add but wasn't sure what to remove for it. This time I opted to cut Deep Analysis as it was probably the least exciting draw spell in blue, and Flood Pit's Drowner adds more removal to blue's arsenal and in a way that isn't in the form of a counterspell. That said, this card is probably the weakest of all the cards I've talked about today, so I'm not sure how long it's going to remain in my cube. We'll see. It's at least unique, and I like that. And finally, Foundations is the most recent Magic set, and the last set of 2024, so now I can safely make this video. Now since this set is so new, the additions here could change in the coming weeks, but this is at least what my initial changes are. Sphinx of Forgotten Lore is the card I'm most excited about, but I didn't have a great one-to-one swap. However, the attack trigger reminded me a lot of the Titan cycle, so I took this opportunity to replace Frost Titan. Frost Titan is certainly a good card, but I think compared to the other 4 Titans, it's just not quite as exciting or impactful. However, giving a card flashback on every attack and getting a creature with flying that could reasonably end the game on its own is exactly what I want my cube to be doing, so the Sphinx was a perfect choice. Another card without a great one-to-one swap was 9 Lives Familiar. I do love how resilient this card is, especially considering I have a few sacrifice synergies in black as well as ways to get cards back. In the end, I chose to cut Crypt Incursion. This is really a sideboard card, and while I do think it's pretty good, I understand that it's a low pick. I really wanted to add Alesha Who Laughs at Fate, and I was dreading making a choice of what to cut, because any cube designer knows how valuable the gold slots are. In the end, I decided to cut Kolaghan's Command. Alesha promotes a very aggressive playstyle, which is exactly what I want out of red-black, and I've been trying to promote that a little bit more. While Kolaghan's Command can definitely help with that, I think it lends itself pretty well more to a control deck that maybe has blue in it. Alesha works well with my red-black aggro cards like Bloodsoaked Champion and Reinforced Ronin that really want to get into combat, but will quickly be outclassed by larger creatures. Alesha will allow them to swing in at will and not worry about dying. Finally, I added Celestial Armor because I actually don't have any protection instants in white, and I like that this card does other things as well. For it, I ended up taking out Hour of Reckoning, as drafters were not really picking it even though I liked it as a token-centric board wipe. But the results and the numbers, they don't lie. Okay, that is every Magic set from 2024, and the cards from them that I put in my cube. There are many more cards in this that I think are a lot of fun, and have really cool designs, which is why I also have a Pauper Cube, a 2-headed Giant Cube, and a brand new cube that I'll be making a video on soon called the Graveyard Cube. Feel free to let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with any of the cards that I ended up putting in my cube, and what your, let's say, top 3 cube cards of 2024 have been. Thanks so much for watching this dense and very wordy video, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe. We are on the road to 1,000.